Welcome all to this exciting session on Sathology with a restaurateur from India, and also she's also very active in Sanatan Dharma activities in India. So you must have seen yesterday we sent out a flyer that who is going to speak. If you have read it about her, and so she has done remarkable some activities been associated for propagating Sanatan Dharma in India. She's also writing an upcoming book. So without delay, I introduce her, Minakshi Sharan. So namaskar.
Namaskar, Aditi. Namaskar, everybody on the show. Thank you for having me here.
So behind you is a very beautiful painting with a sitar. So is there any story attached to that?
Yes, there is. When we come to my Saraswati Untold, definitely. But this is my daughter's workshop studio. She paints here. So she's, just on the finishing stages of Saraswati, the painting behind me. So I quickly shifted here. Yeah, for the next bit of the speed, yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard that you are right now in Indore, and people have heard it's a very clean and beautiful city in India.
Yes. It's been about the last 3, 4 years. Uh, Prior to that, it wasn't so good. And suddenly, even we were quite, zapped when we came once and we saw that everything was absolutely spick and span. So it all goes to the commissioner and, the administration at that time. So they kind of really have drilled it into the people, the civic sense. It's become very nice and clean.
Yeah. So coming back to you're a restaurateur, and the Indian food is extremely famous in USA, and
Yes.
it's like and also now with the COVID-19, more and more people are moving towards Indian kind of simple cooking, and
Yeah.
it has been a big talk about it. There are many talk shows, many cooking shows promoting Indian way of cooking because they saw a research that the vegetarians had more immunity to viruses. How much do you believe in that?
Right. Um, as far as my restaurants go, incidentally, they happen to be Mediterranean cuisine, but we do cook on special occasions. We cook Indian, um, but I've had this, chance of exploring a lot of um, food in the various cities and the various regions of India, and the ancient modes of cooking, and I studied a lot of these herbs and the spices and grains and crop and their health benefits as well as the medicinal properties. So there's a huge, possibility. In fact, so far, what was happening was that it's a very commercialized, industrialized way of cooking is very different from the real methods of cooking. So there's now, especially after COVID, we are already thinking of creating something like that with the more ancient ways of methods of cooking, the pots, the slow cooking and things like that, and with minimum herbs and minimum spices. So there's a lot of possibility of all that in the times to come.
Yeah. So food is a medicine, and I think more Americans are realizing that. Indians already knew about it, but more Americans are coming to that. Now, coming back to your background, you yesterday you mentioned that how you came from undivided India, which is today Pakistan, and you came from there, and your family came from there, and how your family has always been involved in a big Sanatan Dharma tradition. Plus, you have that ambition also. So, what do you want to do, or what have you done in terms of contributing to Sanatan Dharma?
Um, Should I just give you a little bit of background about the family?
Yes.
Um, Yes. So my both my paternal and maternal families come from that part of India, which is now Pakistan. One, and two, my father, they trace their lineage back to the fourth century Nanda dynasty, which was Padam King Padam Anand. So and then the in fact they were the founders, or they developed and ruled the Magad, which was the most powerful of the states at that time. And then King Anand's sons ruled Takshila, Bera, that area where my family was. Hindu kings, from the 9th till 11th century. So those were the kind of stories that we heard. Also, stories from Sindh and Zubal, Zabul and Kabul. So Multan, although the first Sun Temple in Multan. So those kind of stories, and then obviously a lot of art and culture of that belt. And then when they shifted from Pakistan to India when this happened. So when the disturbance started, so around the 40s, part of the families were shifting, and so we've had these survival stories. We've had these honor killing stories in the family on both the sides. So literally growing up on those stories, kind of uh, I was inclined towards knowing more of history. So that's one. And so when we talk of, say, history of India, if we go by the Vedic traditional calculations, it goes to millennia. Like, for example, if I was to just tell you that in Valmiki's Ramayana, there's a shlok in Balkan, which says that the Vindhyas and the the Himalayas are of the same height, So if you go by those calculations, it would be something like 8 lakh years, So maybe the Ram Yug, they say, could be that ancient. So it's like, uh, at least I am a firm believer of my scriptures, and like the Veds enshrine, that you call the Veds eternal, right? And then they enshrine uh, various sciences, including multiple universes and uh, relativity of time and stuff like that. So all your historical events also were documented with all the planetary conditions of those times. So lots of researches are happening today as it is on those astronomical mathematics, right? So if we were to impart all that knowledge to the youth of today, um, you cannot wait those many years, So you have to kind of produce something in a nice and interesting manner which appeals to them, and at the same time let it be more, like a chronology of the events, and you create that data and serve it to them. So I'm working on something like that. Um, Besides, if you were to ask any particular question on that.
So based on what you just said, one thing that strikes me, which you said 8 lakh years, for viewers, 8 lakh means 800,000 is like 0.8 million years. And one thing that strikes me there is that the modern historians are in many ways working with many faulty techniques. We had a discussion with many modern archaeologists, and they generally said that the carbon dating doesn't work. It doesn't give the accurate results. So at Sathology, we believe that till the time the technology evolves, we'll go by what original people wrote. So we will accept what Valmiki says until technology evolves. So I give you full credit over there. So in terms of Ram's, yeah, go ahead.
sorry. So if we were to also, there's another very interesting thing that I'll tell you. We have this tradition of, when we sit for the puja, we always, start with taking a sankalp. That is, a sankalp before starting a puja as to we are doing this. So in that particular sankalp, you always are supposed to, tell the location, recite the location of where you are. So that particular shlok, which is going on since then till now, so that really talks about all those Shri Shweta Varaha Kalpe Vaswata Manvantare, Ashtavinshatitame Yuge Kali Pratama Charne, वो लोके जम्बू द्वीपे भरत वर्षे भरत खंडे आर्यावर्त अंतर्गत के देशे. So you talk of that entire, so when you talk of Jambu Dweep, so that is a undivided landmass, huge landmass undivided by sea. And when they say Sri Ram's kingdom extended from the Pariyatra Parvat, which they call Hindu Kush mountains now, till the extreme ends of Jambu Dweep. Yeah. So if we were to also believe that, then obviously we are again talking of the millennia and all that. That is, like I said, if so many sciences are enshrined in the Veds, and you pick and choose few that you wish to, so you cannot reject these as well. You have to accept this too. You have to accept them in totality, or you just reject them totally. So, like I said, I'm a firm believer.
No, that's perfectly right, because we are also firm believer. My point to the Western academics is usually that if you can
Yes.
disprove me, the proving of what I say is up to you, not to me. I'm going to
Right.
go by Valmiki and Vyasdev, but to prove it, it's your job, not my job. So, so,
Absolutely.
so that's how we work with them. That's why when they invented the term mythology, we invented the term mythology. So we call Greek and Romans as mythology, but Ramayana and Mahabharata is mythology. So there is no difference in comparison.
But
Now,
then, if I was to tell you that even the word myth was basically adopted from the 8th century Homer and his contemporary from those times, and in the 15th, the British use it as the term mythology, just to kind of suggest that all the 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 Hindu culture or all such similar pagans were basically false. So that's how the Western academia actually popularized it. But by myth, actually the Greeks also did not really mean that it was wrong. It was false. Yeah.
I gave a talk in the University of Greece last year, and I gave a talk on that how Alexander was a mouse, and there was a big opposition to that, Alexander the mouse, because they never imagined that the Alexander was defeated by the women of Multan. Multan's women defeated him when he was going back, and also he was a midget guy, very short-heighted guy, 5 feet 2 inches, and so in many ways, so there was no characteristic symbols of greatness. And
Right.
so most of the legends that are written about the Greek heroes are actually a myth, because when you see the example of Porus, so when Porus saw Alexander for the first time, as recorded in Moscow University's record of Alexander, Porus said that how can this ugly, small, stocky man be the king called Alexander? So that was the observation of Porus, because Porus was a very tall person, and the Greeks they described him as a very tall person who almost looked like a demon. So that's what, obviously, an enemy will always look like a demon. So that's what the Greeks' description about Porus. But the Porus description about Alexander is very remarkable. That is tall, small, stocky guy, fat, and very ugly. How can he be Alexander? That was his description. So when people hear this description, and because so much has been fed into their minds by the propaganda machine of Western universities and also intelligentsia and the leftists, they believe that is true. So I think it's time for us to put our narrative together. And we have not even started, but they're already accepting defeat everywhere. We have not yet started. So now
Yes,
coming
but
back,
I
yeah, go
must
ahead.
also congratulate. Yeah, I must also congratulate you. You're doing a remarkable job. I can already see, you're really getting fantastic speakers on the platform, and I can even Kak sir's interview that I saw yesterday was just remarkable.
No, thank you. I think the credit goes to the team. My next question to you is especially related to the culture of food, because the Western countries, the food habits are pretty much dominated by McDonald's, and everybody knows that
Mm.
McDonald's is a biggest danger to health for Americans. So the culture of India is not just philosophy; it's also the food, the arts, the warfare, political strategies. All these things is the culture of India. And food is a very important part of reaching out to millions for Sanatan Dharma. So, what ways you think you can use that for using food as a strategy? Because I can tell you, you can tell any amount of philosophy, but in the end, people wait for food in any gathering. So, please, did you hear what I said last time?
Yes, I did.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I did. And also, like very commonly said, of course, they say it in terms of, in regard of men normally, that the way to a man's heart is, through his stomach, but then that goes for everyone. Uh, so when, like I said, I was fortunate enough to, uh, work in various fields, not just in the restaurants, and from this family background of the history. So it's like I have heard beautiful stories related to food, as to the sowing of the from the sowing of the seed to the harvesting, how women sang, and then the songs were related to the seasons, the food, the health, so much of it. And then, uh, what was the side crop that they're growing, the seasons, what is the right season for the right crop, the direction, the morning sun, how much it should get, and, things like that. And moreover, since the family also has this background of agriculture, and also my maternal uncles are settled in Kerala from 40s. So even there, them growing the spices and herbs and, cashew nuts. So I was fortunate enough to learn quite a bit about the entire country, and various methods of cooking, and various ways of eating. And as simple as that, that according to the climatic condition of a particular region, the food is popular. So, or the staple is that particular food which is, suitable to those climatic conditions. That's one. Two, in our Vedic system also, be it life, human life or plant life, you believe that the soul, or the Atma that we call, is similar in every living being, or everything that lives. So when you grow something, and when you pluck the fruit, it has to be fresh. That was the first thing that we always had in mind. And fresh, as in, you say that it still has that pran tattva, we call it, the life force when you pluck it. So one emphasis was always on fresh. Then you don't cut something and keep for a very long time, like in the modern times, in the malls or in the food malls, you'll have cut food or cut vegetables available, cut fruit available, or salads kept for very long. You may say, like in our trade, you may say you're preserving at a certain degree or whatever. But uh, uh, our system said that the surface you cut, the moment you cut, from that cut surface, all the nutrient is gone. A nutrient, what you call pran tattva in Hindi. So the emphasis was on fresh, emphasis was on little, emphasis was on just enough to survive. You were not supposed to just hog throughout the day, and also the physical activity. So I think the basic principles of Ayurveda or the plant, you know, life in our part of the world is that. Like I said, I'm not getting the particular word. Mm, I'm not getting the. Let me think. So anyway, so the future is going to be fresher. Maybe you do not have those huge restaurants, so you may just have small dining places with lesser, like our restaurants at the moment, 240 covers each. So maybe you have smaller restaurants where you cut, cook fresh and serve fresh. And also the ancient traditional food never used too much spices. It was just flavored with minimum spices and minimum herbs. So and every herb or every say spice, for example, turmeric. So that's antiseptic. So every herb has a property, a nutritional quality, and a property attached. So I think also another important thing is like you would also worship, when you cook. So there's the Bhagwan or the Lord of health, or Ayurveda is Dhanvantri. So you also worship those. So there's a tradition where if somebody is sick in the family, also you will speak the Dhanvantri mantra and cook, and you can heal the person. So like you very rightly said, that we actually treat food as a life force, and not even as a medicine, but just enough to survive and remain fit and alert.
Yeah, we live to. There's a common American saying that we eat to live, not live to
Yeah.
eat. So that's a right way to sum it up. Now coming back to this, I call it the food science, and you touched on very important things. That the food is of three types: sattva-gun, rajogun, tamogun. And what you described is the sattva-gun, which is the mode of goodness, where the food has to be fresh. And unfortunately, in America, we have become, there's a term called nuking the food, nuking the food. So you take out the food from the freezer, nuke it in the microwave, and eat it. And believe me, that is the cause of so many diseases, because you are eating a food which is preserved with chemicals, and even though it may be Indian food, it doesn't matter whether it's Indian or Chinese, it doesn't matter. And
So even
another
when
as yeah, go ahead, please.
So even when we look at the typically Indian style of cooking, even though all the McDs and the KFC and everything, Pizza Huts and all that is getting popular here, but the traditional homes will still, like I said, focus on whole grains and unprocessed food, and unpreserved food. So we have women in the family still making their own jellies and jams and pickles and condiments. So that those traditions are still very much alive, and uh, even the parents aren't very happy when children are actually into more of fast food, and we actually call it junk. So the mothers make sure that even if they've had with friends, something once in a while, they'll make sure that they eat sufficient fruit and vegetable on the particular day to kind of balance it out for them.
No, in India, the concept of junk food really makes sense because junk food is what is not cooked in the house. In America, virtually every single food people even they eat in the house is also partially junk food because a lot of canned food is used, and so naturally the food is not fresh. And out of 350 million Americans, around 350 million, only 6 million are the farmers. Only
Yeah.
6 million. So that is 6 million people feeding 350 million people, and which is a very
Right.
small percentage. So to make up for the productivity, they have to use extreme amount of GMOs, which is genetically
Mhm.
modified food products, and also they have to use an extreme amount of chemicals to produce such large quantity, because pretty much America is the largest food producer in any category you take, other than India. India is always first, second, third, but India has a big population to take care as well. So in that way, so the lot of chemicals are part of the diet itself. And also in USA, the concept of slaughterhouses, now from the Chinese, I don't want to say Chinese, but due to this COVID-19, we have a little bit more awareness of reducing dependence on slaughterhouses. A little bit more awareness, because I have always been advocating that to close down all the slaughterhouses. And so that is coming up and moving towards Indian origin type of cooking, which is fresh, simple, and quick.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe,
yeah, go ahead.
like we say, may it turn out to be a blessing in disguise. Yeah.
Now, for the people who want to teach the values of Sanatan Dharma in Ayurveda, this is a great chance. Using Ayurveda and the food science from India is a great chance. So my next question to you is there any plans you have to now, using YouTube and other channels that we have, to popularize the grinding of spices, how to create spices, that kind of, those kind of core programming I'm seeing missing right now. So where you actually grind and you talk about different spices. Do you have anything like that in mind?
Yes, I already have, and I'm already working on certain things. Like I said, with this, the last 2-3 months, we've been brainstorming, because we know that the restaurants are going to be difficult now, and because of the social distancing and many other things. Because each restaurant has big kitchen staff, so all that is going to be difficult now. So we planned something like more on farm base and small outlets, which you can which are attached to your farm, and more of fresh produce, and also teach people or invite people to come and actually pick their fruit and vegetable, and have it or cook it themselves in front of you, or learn cooking, or eat when eat what is being cooked in front of you. And also, so the lessons attached with all the sciences, and the medicinal properties, and the micronutrients in the herbs, and vegetables, grains, and spices, the importance of whole food, and like you said, so all that is already working on my mind. So like you said, I did not, of course, think of a YouTube, but you've given me a good idea, because we could have like small clips to talk about each one small ingredient maybe. So that idea, yeah.
So another thing which I feel which will be a great help to people is, see, we are thinking in terms of proteins and nutrients
Right.
and vitamins, but Bhagavad Gita speaks about a food which is smelling good, juicy, and little fatty. Krishna says that it has food as a little fatty also. So we, instead of that, we want the food to be lean. We take out all the essences, and also pleasing to the heart is very important. So meat is not pleasing to the heart because there's a blood on the table. So these are the things which Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita. And the Western society's cooking is exactly opposite that. Exactly. So when you go to any kitchen, I have a lot of American friends. Probably they'll be very upset with me after this session. But when you go to their kitchens, it's very upsetting. You have blood. You're washing blood in this thing, which is very unclean for us. So in that way, if you look at the Indian cooking, you have green color, red color, or yellow colors. Then you have spices colors. The whole thing looks so colorful and beautiful, pleasing to the heart.
Yes, yes.
So
Also,
that
there's, let me just, in a very logical and a very simple manner, that if from your 0 to the growth development period is, say, about 13-14 years of age. Till then, you need more protein because you are growing. Yes, so all your cells need more protein. But then as you are past that age, 17, 18 upwards, till your last, you just need enough nutrients to survive. You see, to survive and be fit and be agile and active. So obviously, it's more of fruit, it's more of vegetable, it's more of light food, like I said, and obviously fats, as in the ghee, because we use buttermilk or say butter oil, what we call ghee. So because a right amount for your brain also, it's not going to function. I believe that your brains are going to be not functioning optimum. So by the logic also, it's absolutely fit,
Yeah, and what point I was making was when you classify the food as just proteins and vitamins, then practically you can eat anything. You can eat bugs, you can eat any kind of thing you can eat. But instead of that, if you take the human side of it, the food has to look pleasing, not just presented in a nice way, but also it should look also pleasing. And that's where the Western mythology of protein is not correct in many ways, because proteins you can get from plants as well. And in the American Medical Association, I just yesterday wrote an article for Vancouver Yoga Festival, and in that I mentioned that how the American Medical Association promotes a plant-based protein diet, and that is it's not even a religious thing. Uh, but thank you so much for your time today. We learned a lot, and congratulations on all your endeavors, for speaking to all of us today. Thank you. Do you have any last words to say to the audience?
um, to the audience. I think all that I have, gathered or accumulated over the years, I'd really like to share that bit by bit. I'd just like to say that our culture, like I said, there's a lot to learn from our history, our culture, our food, our art, our dance, our music, and there's a lot that India has given to the world and can still give, and we have to just revive that. We have to study all that, and we've got to actually put it in front of the people, in a platter, in a manner that they understand the value of coexistence and oneness, and that is what. If I was to talk of dharma, so that is what dharma is, just holding, like dharma meaning dharan karna, how the existence holds itself, balances itself. So that same way we have to also just fit our part like a part in the jigsaw puzzle and just coexist, and because we are interdependent. So that's the only way forward, and I think in your upcoming thing, I'd like to talk of those various subjects. Also about Saraswati, that I created the opera. So I look forward to seeing you again and sharing whatever little bit that I know.
All right. So thank you all viewers for coming and watching this show. See you again next time with another topic. Namaskar. Thank you.